What is basketball? What is it? Is this basketball? Is that basketball? What is it? What is basketball?
Welcome back to episode 2 of Solving Basketball. I'm Jordan Sperber here today with UCLA basketball's video and analytics coordinator, Kory Alford. Kory, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Jordan. I'm super excited for you, and I'll be following this podcast on your YouTube. Congrats on the new venture.
I really appreciate it. I was talking to John Gasway a couple months ago, and he asked me who else in college basketball was doing analytics stuff similar to what I did, and I think that you were the first name, and that's kind of where I came up with the idea to have you as the first coach on the podcast.
Right. Yeah, no, I know. I reached out to you kind of right when I got into the industry my first year, and picking your brain, we talked for a couple hours. I remember that day, and kind of took some of your ideas. And I actually talked to John a couple weeks ago. We always stay in touch on Twitter, and I always stay in tune with what he's writing about. Super interested in his the shot volume index he's come up with, and so we were talking about that for quite a while. But yeah, John's a great guy and one of the best at kind of combining analytics and basketball right now.
For sure. And he's a really good writer too, beyond just the analytics.
Super good writer.
Yeah. All right, so first question of the podcast for every guest, before we get into the serious stuff. If me and you walked into a gym right now and I went under the hoop and you went to the foul line and you shot 100 free throws in a row, how many would you make?
Ooh, that's a good question. I'll go with, I'm getting over 80. I can guarantee you that because that's our team goal. But I will say it's gonna bother me shooting 100 straight shots inside the 3-point line, because that's kind of where I like to get to. If you've ever played pickup with me, you know I don't shoot very many twos.
Understood, which is on brand with the analytics, but I'm still gonna need you. Right. I'm still gonna need you said over 80. What's the definitive?
Yeah, I'll give you 85.
85. Okay. Yeah. Gotcha. So Ken Pomeroy on the first episode said 60. So you're in first place right now.
Okay. Yeah, I'll get Ken. I got him on the free throw line.
All right. So for those that don't know, you did play college basketball at New Mexico and UCLA. So I'm curious, kind of the timeline of you getting into analytics. How did you get interested, and did it overlap with your playing days?
Yeah. So like you said, I played at New Mexico and UCLA. I was a walk-on at both. Kind of blessed to be a part of some very good teams. I think I was a part of 3 conference championship teams. We went to 2 Sweet 16s. Got to play with countless NBA guys, but it's kind of a two different kind of approaches I had at those 2 schools. At New Mexico, I was really trying to eventually play and see the court. I've always known I wanted to get into coaching, but while I was there, I was still very focused on my playing career. And then when I came to UCLA, it kind of shifted a little bit because I wanted to higher level. But I was trying to find a way that I could help out outside of the court. That's kind of when I got into being like the volunteer video assistant. And so a lot of times I was just helping Corey Barnett, who was our video guy at the time. He's now our basketball operations. And I basically was just trying to find ways that I could help out. And at first it was just kind of helping out with the video side of things, whether it's sports code breakdown for our team, making edits, or helping out with scouting. And then after just a little bit of time, I found that we really needed kind of to take that next step and dive into analytics. And so I think it did happen while I was a player. The very first project I kind of started on was just charting our offensive efficiency within our plays. And so I would track every single game, the plays that we would run, and then how many points we would score off of those. And I was actually looking at this a couple of days ago. It's kind of interesting. The way it started, it was just like this ugly Excel spreadsheet. And then now we still do the very similar thing, but it's all scripted out and automatic and a lot more pretty than it was in day one, but still the same idea at the core. But yeah, so it definitely started when I was still a player, just trying to find a way to bring value to the staff.
Got it. And you hit on what I wanted to talk about next, was how specifically you do it. So you mentioned you started with Excel and then switched over to sports code. For people who don't know sports code, listening to the podcast. It's really a video software system used by most D1 basketball programs, but you can do a lot of really cool analytics with it. I think a lot of programs don't use that side of it, and was kind of the inspiration for my YouTube channel that's coming out here, to do some of that scripting stuff. So beyond sports code, I've definitely seen some tweets where you use Tableau. Is that your kind of go-to non-basketball software?
Yeah, so Tableau, I got into it actually because you get it for free when you're a student.
Yep.
And so I was looking for kind of just a data viz option, just to get something a little bit better, kind of see things and present things in a better way. And so I tried out Tableau because it was free, and it's been actually phenomenal for me and phenomenal for our staff because, one, it's a really good software, but two, I think data viz is honestly a key to the analytics like battle that you have, whether it's with your staff or your players. The way you present it is a lot more important than even what is there, because if you can't simplify it, you can't kind of key in on what you're trying to show, then it almost just, it doesn't matter what you're saying. And so I think Tableau has been huge for whether it's putting logos onto charts or just kind of cleaning up the data to present it in a way that everyone can understand quickly. That was really big for me. And so, yeah, we continue to use Tableau still to this day. And yeah, I mean, sports code, like you said, it's a very dynamic software that definitely people across the country need to use more. I think the output windows that you're going to present on your YouTube channel are going to be very helpful, because a lot of the stuff we've done, we've stolen from other teams and other video coordinators, and just ideas from people. You just kind of take it and then adapt it to your own. But it's not that much work. You just have to kind of do it ahead of time. I think that's the whole key. You have to have it ready before the first game, because it's not something that you can kind of work with as the year goes along. You got to have that prep work done, because as you know, you don't have the free time to kind of mess around with stuff once the season actually starts.
Absolutely. And that's the power of coding or automation is that once you set it up in the off season,
then it's easy.
Yeah, exactly. You're just labeling games and it's going from there. And we really had that going last year. I think my first 2 years as a video coordinator, I was like overwhelmed by all the different tasks. But by year 3, you can settle in and get a lot better at it.
Yeah, the better you get with sports code, it's interesting, because we're doing way more now than we did kind of 2 or 3 years ago, and yet it feels like less because of how automated everything is.
Good point. Yep. How much help do you guys have with your video needs at UCLA?
So our main video it'll be me. Corey Barnett is like I said, our video ops guy. Our basketball ops, and he helped out with video a ton. We alternate on scouts, so we each have a video scout during the year, which takes up a majority of our time once the season actually starts. And then we have a graduate manager, Joe Preston, who he's been with us now for 4 years. So he's like our mini me. He runs all the video, and he understands everything that we do. So he's been a huge help for us. And then we have managers that help out, but they typically stay on the more basic side of things and just kind of OD, kind of setting up the basic packages for us three to kind of deal with.
Got it. So if someone's listening to this podcast who wants to get into college basketball, I guess let's say an undergraduate student, right, specifically maybe analytics or video, what would be like the ideal skill set for that person to have? Yeah,
so I think one, trying to be a manager is probably the best way for just a regular student to get into it. I think you get to meet the right people. And if you have a passion for either video or the analytics side, that presents the opportunity. It's definitely not a given. You just have to kind of show that you're willing to work, that you have a skill set that can be used. But I would say being a manager is probably the best way to do that. There's always video help that is needed. We never have enough help, I guess is the right way to say it. In season, we can always use it. So I think any managers that are willing to help us, we always accept them. And a lot of our managers have gone on to do video roles, whether it's in college or in the NBA. I think we had one last year that's now working with the Lakers. We had one a year ago that worked with the Hornets for a stint. And so I think it's a great way to meet people, and you get the skill set needed for when you actually do get a job in video or analytics. So yeah, I would definitely highly recommend being a manager.
Definitely, yeah. And it's cliche, but everyone says as a manager, you have to prove that you're great at doing laundry or whatever, and then you can get the video stuff, and then so you have to prove that you're great at that first thing before you can get on to more. But everyone wants the help, so they're usually pretty willing to let you do the video or let you do the analytics. I will say,
Absolutely.
With the YouTube channel, I think an opportunity that I might have for some managers and grad assistants or people aspiring to be that is to get some hands-on experience with sports code. I'll have more on that in like a month or so, but I think that it could be a pretty cool way to like almost develop guys, and I'm excited about that.
Yep, absolutely. That's a great idea.
All right, so moving on a little bit here. Do you know Stats by Lopez, Michael Lopez on Twitter?
I do not.
Okay, so he's stats professor at Skidmore. He did just get hired by the NFL, so he does analytics for the league office, I think, in the NFL.
Gotcha.
And he played Division III football, and his dad is I think, pretty successful high school football coach somewhere in Boston. Michael is a football player, but also very into analytics. And he told this story on Twitter one time about how he had to have the talk with his dad about going for it on fourth down, basically trying to convince his dad to go for it more on fourth down.
Love that.
So I'm curious if the listeners haven't realized yet, you are Steve Alford's son, the head coach of UCLA. So I'm curious, have you had any basketball concepts or any parallels to having the talk with your dad or the rest of the coaching staff?
Right. So I think that's a great story. I think more so than like a specific talk, it was, and it's been a long process, but just kind of breaking the habit of kind of the old school way of thinking about certain statistics. So I think just kind of bringing in the new age, advanced box score stuff, the efficiency, the tempo-based statistics, that in the beginning, it just didn't mean anything to the staff or the players because they didn't have a reference point for it. And so I think just over time, kind of slowly bringing it up, trying to help them understand like where I'm coming from and where the kind of the game is going. But at the same time, I think the NBA has been a huge help because everything trickles down from that place. And when they're doing it, it makes it a lot easier to kind of sell. And so whether it's, I don't know, cutting out mid-range or just kind of increasing your three-point rate, just stuff like that, that kind of mirrors what the NBA is doing. It makes it a lot easier when you're having that conversation. I would say, I guess, three-point rate is a good example of not the talk, but it was a big conversation piece we had for the 2017 season. We had a very low 3-point rate the last 2 years before that. I think we were at like 27%. And so we were a very efficient offense, but I saw that as an area that we could definitely increase. And we had a team coming in that had honestly 5 shooters on the court at all times. And so it was a write-up I did in the spring that we just kind of discussed as a staff that, look, we really need to increase our 3-point rate. And we went up to like 37% that year. And then last year we were even higher at 40%. And so I think just little things like that kind of over time have just helped us kind of transition more to an analytically driven staff and kind of team.
Got it. And I did want to talk about that 2017 season. You said that it was kind of a deliberate change over time. How about from a basketball perspective? So you want to shoot more threes. what kind of stuff did you do from a basketball perspective in terms of offensive style or just emphasizing things with players to actually shoot more threes?
Right. So I think one, our system is kind of set up for that. We've always been predicated on kind of pace and space.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a motion-based offense where usually four guys are outside on the perimeter, always looking to make the extra pass, always looking to pass and move, kind of hunting daylight on the outside on the perimeter. And so I think it was more so just a focus on getting threes up. And I think we keyed in on a few areas where we found that we could get more, whether that was on like offensive rebound kickouts or post touches, or I think transition was key for that year. Having a point guard like Lonzo definitely opens that up a ton. And then you got guys like Bryce and Isaac Hamilton who had a super quick release, and it was just more empowering those guys to look. If you're even close to open from the 3-point line, it's got to go. It's kind of a culture shift of where we just really wanted to get 3-pointers up, and then it helps when they go in a bunch because that team was about as good of a shooting team as there's ever been. I think last year's Villanova kind of topped us, but before that, there wasn't an offense as potent as that team was, and so I think that was a lot of fun to be a part of.
Right. That team, I looked it up just before this, and that team finished first in the country in raw points per possession on offense, and I think second in KenPom's adjusted offensive efficiency.
Yeah, Oklahoma State got us at the very end, and it was only because that Big 12 that year was so loaded. So that was a big L for me personally because I love seeing that. I love seeing that number one next to the name.
Well, on his site, under the raw points per possession, there still is a number one.
Yeah, you got to just hit that button.
Right. I went back and looked at Lonzo Ball's season too. He had a little up and down NBA season shooting the ball, but
right.
I guess I forgot just how good his numbers were at UCLA. So right. I looked at since 2010, KenPom started identifying players by position. So I looked at all point guards since 2010,
yep.
And Lonzo was first in 2-point percentage for a point guard. He shot over 70% from two, and I think he was second in effective field goal percentage for a point guard since 2010.
Right. And if you go look at his shot chart, the reason that is because he did not take any mid range. And I don't know if it was that he wasn't comfortable with kind of his pull up, which was fine at our level, and it probably is a bigger deal at the next level because you can scout better. But he was strictly 3-point and at the rim, and he was highly efficient finishing at the rim. And then with our offense, with how dangerous everybody was, especially like TJ and those guards, the court was so opened up.
So we don't need to get into this too much, but what do you expect from Lonzo's efficiency going forward in the NBA? Do you think that he can get back to that level that he had at UCLA?
Yeah, so I think I've always told people I think Lonzo has just a natural instinct for the game of basketball. He is as good of a passer that I've ever seen. I think obviously his shot mechanics are different. I think he's changed his shot maybe this offseason, so we'll see on that. But obviously playing with LeBron, I think his game is perfect for that. And if he can make that work, it'll be great for his career because I do think he will figure it out eventually. He's a really, really good player.
I want to talk about another player that he was on that 2017 team as well, Thomas Welch. Mm-hmm. His first 3 years with you guys, he took, I believe, 1 3-point attempt.
1 for 1.
Yeah, exactly, 1 for 1. And then his senior year, he shot over 40%. So I want to ask you about the process of turning Thomas Welch from a really good mid-range shooter into a 3-point shooter.
Right. So, yeah, that's purely attributed to Tom's hard work, first off. He always was a phenomenal shooter. That was always his kind of go-to. Great touch around the basket, but a great set shot that was huge for our offense the last 4 years. You have a 5-man that can be a kick-out guy that makes it almost every shot he gets. It's really hard to guard. But he deserves all the credit for increasing his range. It kind of I think he increased it by 2 or 3 feet every year. When he came in, he was like at 12 or 13 feet. And that was just kind of where he stayed. And then as he got older and progressed each year, he kind of kept moving back and back. And by his junior year, he was really close to that 3-point line. And so that whole offseason before, massive for one, our offense, but also just for him and his personal development, because I think now the NBA has seen that. The Nuggets took him late in the draft, which was amazing. We are super happy for Tom. They're going to love him, but they believe that he can move it back to the next line, which is a credit to him that he showed that while he was here in college. But he's a very unique player. His senior year, I didn't think he would shoot that many threes, but once he was very comfortable with it, we were always pushing him to shoot it, because him, like any other player, that the three is much more valuable of a shot than the mid-range is. And I think it's actually funny because he was always the example. It was actually a great example to connect with the team. I would use Tom to explain why we don't want mid-range jumpers, because Tom, I think it was whether sophomore or junior year, but one of the years he shot like 51% from mid-range. And so I would ask them, like, have you guys seen anybody else who makes mid-range jumpers better than Tom does? And nobody ever can, because he's as good as anybody in the country. But at 51%, that's still like 1.02 points per possession. And so I would use that to explain why, look, even if you shoot 34% from three, that's a more valuable shot than Tom shooting a mid-range jumper. And it's not a discredit to you, Tom. We still want you taking it. But at the same time, we still want threes. And so he was actually a perfect example for kind of selling that point.
And this is something that I have a lot of experience in too. What has been the reaction when you explain something like that, technically speaking, to players?
It's hit or miss. Some of the guys get it right away. Some of the guys, it takes a longer time. So like, I think the efficiency thing is what we try to, if they get nothing else, I want them to understand offensive and defensive efficiency, what our goals are and why those are our goals. So, for example, our offensive goal is over 110 points per 100 possessions. And then our defensive goal is under 95. And so that's what we key on. We do it. We talk about it in practice. We talk about it in film. We talk about it after each game. At the end of the season, everybody understands it. Everybody gets it. Everybody gets why we do it. Outside of that, I don't try to get too technical. It's just not really worth it. A lot of the advanced stuff is more for our staff, especially when it comes to scouting. I really try to make scouting statistics very simple. We don't throw that into our scouting reports a ton. It may go into the way that we approach a game or the reason we kind of take a certain strategy, but it's not something that we are always bringing up or talking about. I think simplifying everything is very key to kind of the analytics movement, because you don't want to overload anybody, because then I think you lose a lot of trust.
Sure. And I think that also establishing credibility with the players is really important. So when I first got to New Mexico State, or I first got to Nevada, I probably couldn't just start rambling off stats to guys and
Right.
expect them to take it seriously. But honestly, by the end of it, you almost don't even have to tell them the numbers. If they trust you and you've been right in the past,
Absolutely.
you don't even need to go into numbers. Just like, that's not a good shot. That mid range is not a good shot, right? And
Absolutely.
yeah. So it's like the human element too, in terms of that. That's the neat part about working in college basketball, is you're with the guys every single day. You're on the road with them.
Yep.
So it's really pretty easy to develop that trust and credibility really quick.
Absolutely.
I wanted to ask you a couple of scenarios, I guess, if you were playing a team, or we'll do one in-game scenario as well. Let's talk about post defense.
Sure.
So if you were going up against a dominant post player, I guess the guy in your conference from last year would be DeAndre Ayton. What would be your basic rules, maybe, or even more specific than that, for guarding someone like DeAndre Ayton?
Right. So, yeah, it's interesting because in theory, you're fine with a post up, kind of letting guys shoot over you, make it tough on them. But you're right. There are certain guys every year that especially in college, get super efficient on a post up. They're bigger than everybody. They're just kind of man child, and so there are scenarios where you got to have a different kind of coverage. I don't love putting 2 on the ball. I think you just open yourself up for threes. We just got back. Kory Barnett and I went to Boston Celtics training camp on Monday and Tuesday, and that is their big kind of defensive principle, is that they try to never get 2 on the ball because it just puts you at such a disadvantage where you're scrambling, trying to find the open guy, and you just give up threes. Especially at that level, everybody's a good shooter, and so it's a big deal that they're almost going to live with the post up as well. But yeah, I think there are times in college where you might need kind of a big to big double with like a guy like Ayton. You really just want to push him outside the paint, make his jump hook a 8-footer rather than a 4-footer. And that's on your big man, and he's got to be able to do that. And I thought Tom did that last year. Tom and Gigi both, for us, did a great job on him. Even the game in the Pac-12 tournament where he was dominant, it started by him hitting a bunch of mid-range jumpers, which we were fine with, and he made them. And so then that opened up kind of his offensive rebounding and everything else. But obviously there's times where a big's going to be dominant like that, and it's not easy, but I definitely don't like bringing 2 to the ball.
The other thing that complicates it a little bit in the NCAA as opposed to the NBA is foul trouble. So if you play straight up in the post, it can be pretty hard to stay out of foul trouble, and you might only go 7 or 8 deep,
Right.
Unlike an NBA team that's got 12 guys that can play.
Absolutely, and that always plays a role in your post defense as well. You're very concerned about foul trouble. And a lot of these bigs are young, and so they struggle with foul trouble anyway, just because of their defensive fundamentals.
Right. So now a specific game situation here. I'm going to try to give guests little questions like this pretty regularly. So you're down 3 with 15 seconds left in the game. Let's say you're coming out of a timeout, so it's a dead ball. What are you you're not speaking for UCLA necessarily, but what are you, Coach Alford, running out of that timeout? Do you want a quick 2? Do you want a quick 3? You're down 3 and there's 15 seconds left.
Okay. I think it definitely depends on the team. Always so many variables in like these type of scenarios. I always hate when kind of coaches get critiqued on their decision making in these spots, because so much goes into it that isn't always kind of visible to the public. But for this hypothetical, I would say I would definitely set up a play for a 3 out of that timeout. Whether it was like a hammer play or like a pick and pop for a big that can shoot it. Mainly because you said 15 seconds left. I think right now is probably the best chance to tie the game. If you go for the 2, you probably can get a quick layup, but you're going to get fouled the next time down if you're up by 3, because there's probably going to be less than 7-8 seconds left. If you do go for a quick 2, you're fouling, hoping they miss a free throw, but then you got to go try and finish at the rim or get a 3 look at the end, which I think percentages at the rim go way down with like less than 5 seconds on the clock. So I would definitely draw up a 3 out of that timeout.
Yeah, that's a really good point that you started with about it being very context dependent on the players.
Right.
But it's still interesting to think about, and I think something that that coaching staff should think about. They should have a general idea for what they're going to do in late game, and they do.
Absolutely. In scenarios like that, what you want to get accomplished, I think, is definitely something you got to have ready. When to foul, when to shoot a 3, when to shoot a 2.
What is your kind of ultimate career goal? Do you want to be a head coach?
I do, yeah. That's always kind of been my career goal. I want to be a head coach. I guess as soon as I can. In this industry, you kind of reevaluate every single spring, kind of see what the next move is, where the next spot is. I love my current role. I've enjoyed doing video. It's been great for learning. But I do want to take the next step eventually. I do want to be a head coach. I will probably take the small school route and pursue a smaller college head coaching spot rather than kind of climb the assistant ladder for many years. I just think that's always been intriguing to me. Something my dad did and start his career, and it's something I've always been interested in. Just kind of, I think it's a less pressured situation and scenario where you can kind of run a program and really kind of get a foundation for what you want as your culture, as your team. I just think it's a great place to learn. But yeah, that is my ultimate career goal, is to one day be a head coach.
So I bet there's some smaller school, maybe D3 or high school even, coaches listening. If you were to get one of those jobs, let's talk a little bit about how you might use analytics. So you won't have all the resources of managers and sports
Right.
code and all that we talked about. I think that could be an interesting conversation to touch on a little bit.
Right. Absolutely. So I think so two things to that. I think one, you don't have the resources. So I think it would be important to kind of reach out to the stats department at the school. One thing I've done here is I have interns. This year, they're 2 grad students that volunteer and help out just with little things, whether it's a project or just kind of data parsing, little things that help us during the year that we don't have time for. So I think getting a student that could help out, whether it's anything, it's like video, any little thing helps. And so finding somebody who can do that, even if they don't understand the basketball side a ton, would be fine. Eventually, you want somebody who kind of understands the technical and basketball side of things if they're going to be kind of a part of the staff. But I think if you have somebody that can organize the numbers for you, that's kind of enough at a smaller school level. But the other side of things, I think the lower you go, I think there's opportunity to use analytics to your benefit, to where like at the NBA level, analytics now at this point is really just like it's a base layer. You're not really, it's like baseball at this point. By using analytics, you're not way ahead of everybody else. You're just in line with everybody else. And so I think the farther down you go, analytics hasn't really got down there. And so I think there is an opportunity for any coaches who want to get into it to use that to their benefit in their conference, in their league, whatever it is.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And would you recommend for those coaches what you were talking about earlier with the game goals, offensive efficiency, defensive efficiency, incorporating that into their drills and practice and that kind of thing?
Right. Yeah. So I think, the more analytically driven you can be kind of as a team, whether it's in practice, your film sessions, all of that, the better. I think repetition is key. Simplifying things is key. The game goals, I think, have been one of the bigger things that we've done. That was kind of when I got hired onto the staff. The first project I was in charge of was kind of redoing our game goals. And so we narrowed it down to 12 goals. We have 4 on offense, 4 on defense, and then 4 that are just like a combined games within the game. But yeah, I think the efficiency thing is key. It's very simple. We do it within drills, whether it's we have 10 possessions and we got to hold teams under 9 points. Just little things like that kind of get the idea across, and you're subconsciously drilling the analytical concepts that you want to get to the players.
We talked about this a little bit, but for those high school, college coaches that are thinking about this, who would you recommend or what would you recommend them reading maybe to get started? Do you remember back when you were first going who you were reading?
Yeah, so it's pretty much the story of everybody, but Basketball on Paper, I read it in high school, and that kind of got me started on kind of being interested in analytics. Been a KenPom subscriber for who knows how long. I've always used our sports information director sign-ins. Twitter now is great. There's so many people that are constantly writing, whether it's at the NBA level or at our level, just little ideas and what people are doing and kind of where the game is going. So I think Twitter has been a great resource for that. Trying to think of anybody else. Like you said, Gasaway. Gasaway is a great blog to follow.
Yep. Nylon Calculus would probably be one.
Yeah. Nylon Calculus is probably the best NBA website. It's always coming up with stuff. Cleaning the Glass was a great resource last year. Ben Falk does a phenomenal job there. Just having great like scouting reports and breakdowns of NBA teams that really mirrors how a front office or coaching staff does things. But yeah, the NBA is really taken off in that area that now there are so many resources that you can learn from and kind of track that there's definitely no shortage anymore.
And you said before, and I agree with you that you don't really gain an advantage in analytics in the NBA anymore. It's just the baseline. But you do see the Houston Rockets still shooting way more threes than everyone else. So I think maybe on the court, there might still be some advantages. Maybe how they're evaluating draft talent with draft modeling. That's probably pretty unanimous across the board. But even in baseball, like some teams shift a lot more than others. The Tampa Bay Rays don't use starters anymore. They have relievers coming out to start games. So maybe the more like eccentric things you can still play around with in the NBA.
Well, it's a good point because what everything you just mentioned is head coach and staff buy-in. But not every head coach and staff is fully bought in, and nobody's really as bought in as D'Antoni and them are. And it comes down to having the right team makeup. They have Chris Paul and James Harden, who are as efficient as it gets, and then they have just shooters all over the court. And the way they play is perfectly catered to the analytics movement. So I think that obviously helps. But you're exactly right. There is in-game areas that there is an advantage to kind of make decisions analytically that not every team is making.
Mm-hmm. And the fact that you work in college basketball and are communicating with the coaches and players so closely while also doing the analytics stuff is what makes your job so interesting and why I asked you to come on the podcast for sure.
Yeah, it's a very unique role, and I've loved being in this role. I love being on this staff. We have a bunch of great coaches that do a phenomenal job with our guys. So yeah, it's been a blessing to be here. A great place to start my career, and yeah, being part of video and analytics, I think, is a great place for young coaches to start, just because you're constantly watching basketball, so you have literally no choice but to learn.
Right. So thank you so much again for coming on. I think this has been a great conversation. Where can the people follow you? What's your Twitter handle?
Just my first and last name @Kory Alford. I tweet a little bit more during the season, but yeah, we got practice starting later this afternoon. We are excited about the year. We got a great young team. I'm waiting on Ken Palm's 2018 to come out, but we got to be the tallest team in the nation. So that's what I'm keeping my eye on, team height.
Okay.
So we will see. But yeah, we're very, very athletic and long. We'll have 8 freshmen, so good competitive practices that we're looking forward to as a staff. So
awesome. And again, that's Kory with a K, right? On Twitter?
Yes, with a K. That's true. Kory.
I'll make sure to give you some love on Twitter. And we were just talking about great resources for coaches. Well, they should definitely give you a follow. So thank you again for your time. Best of luck this year, and we'll be in touch soon, I'm sure.
Thanks, Jordan. Same to you, man. Looking forward to all of your work.
All right, Kory.
No hand checking. Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, Tony Kukoc.